Welcome to Belly Button Fluff on My Pillow, the poetic podcast series that approaches mental health and poetry as full amateurs. Welcome to episode 3. My name is Drew Taylor Wilson, my pronouns are they, them, and I am your host and amateur poetry and mental health expert. Poetry, because I write it, usually for therapeutic context, and mental health because often the writing it down for therapeutic context isn't enough. So I made a podcast instead. Each week I sit down with a fellow mental health and poetry sufferer, and this week is a special edition because I have an actual poet with me. My good friend and Stirling's Makar, Kevin P. Gilday. And continuing the special edition theme, this week's episode is going to start with a poem written by me, performed by me. This is a conversation with my mate's 11-year-old son. He knows that I am they. It's not an issue. He has a non-binary friend at school, they use they pronouns too. We haven't seen each other for a few months. He likes the colour of my nail varnish, but he says he'd never wear anything like that. It's too gay, no offence. I say I cannot count the number of times I've been referred to as too gay. I now see it as high praise, but my self-deprecating camp joke doesn't land, and I ask him how school is, and he says it's fine. He doesn't mind that science is now getting harder. He likes the challenge and he's just started drama. He says he likes pretending to be other people. I ask him a few more questions about that, hoping to connect over our mutual love of the theatre, but monosyllables and grunts follow, concluding with, "It's nice to have a class where you run around a lot, but it's not like a pressured running around in PE to hit a goal, it's just fun." And I agree, running around for fun is always better. And we start passing a little beanbag between us. I find it on the floor. His little sister is a toddler, so small tactile objects like this seem to be omnipresent in the household. And the vaguely masculine framed bonding makes me feel bold, and I ask him about how he's doing with his friends, and he wonders what I mean. And I think I wonder what I mean, but I've said it now, and we're both not used to being asked about the quality of the relationships we have with other people born into male bodies, but I've said it now. We're passing this thing between us, and I say I had a terrible time at school with boys. I thought they were mean, they fully didn't understand me, they just wanted to play football, and it's not like I didn't want to play that. I was actually quite good at it when forced to do so in PE, but outside of enforced time never felt like it was fine for me to participate. So I didn't, and I think I sometimes feel so scared of boys. And he asks me if he ever scares me, and I reassure him that this is never the case, that his sensitivity is a gift, and if he's ever facing anything difficult he can always come to me, and we keep passing this thing between us. And he is so sad because he feels like he and his other friends are always told to shut up, to not have the opportunity to say how they feel, because how they feel is automatically horrible to other people, that they should never be proud of who they are, that other people always have more importance than them. They end up listening and worshipping these men online that feed their insecurities, that give them pride in who they are, that make them feel important. And I say that these men are false prophets looking to profit from their vulnerability, that these men in podcasts and bootleg talk shows grow their audience by feeding on disenfranchised lads who feel the same, who blame diversity and progress and women, and despite framing it as saving, as treating a woman like his queen, that his intentions are diabolical, mean, that he wants to try and take the rest of the world down, especially women, especially people like me. And of course I try and question all these things with him, try and allow him to see other perspectives. We keep passing this thing between us, that these men aren't reflective of a balanced view, that he is truly a gift to the world. And we have a cuddle, and he says it was really nice to talk to me, and wonders why he still calls me his uncle, and I say that's because there hasn't been a term invented yet to describe an important adult figure that has close ties to your parents that sits with my current gender expression. And he wonders if it's because I'm scared of boys that I'm non-binary. And I say that might have something to do with it, but mostly was because I don't fit with what we think of as men or women. And we have a cuddle again, but he's got to go to rugby. But he hopes he'll see me again soon. And I do too.
Beautiful. I love that.
Thank you, mate. How are you today?
I'm good today, actually. Yeah. I feel better for having heard that poem, though. Sometimes you just need something to just rattle your brain a little bit and just wake you up and make you think about stuff. And I think that poem definitely did that for me there.
Thank you. How do we know each other?
How do we know each other? Well, we know each other as friends, as collaborators, as fellow artists making our way in the world. Like
10 minutes ago, I was like, how are you? Well, I'm kind of fed up of being really busy and not feeling like I'm being paid enough for all of that. I feel like that's a pretty typical opening for any of our conversations. So we first met with you doing Sonnet Youth. I can't even remember how I ended up getting programmed that first time. You were the only thing I was interested in doing because I knew that yous were sound. So when did Sonnet Youth run?
I don't know, I want to say maybe 2016 through to 2020 maybe.
Because you...
That sounds about right.
Yeah, because you did it coming out, you did it before the pandemic.
Yeah, we were still doing kind of digital stuff during the pandemic, but that was kind of coming to an end at that point.
And then obviously the big thing that we did together within Sonnet Youth realm is you produced my show, Thick Skin Elastic Heart, which if you're a regular listener of the podcast, the previous 2 episodes have featured poems that were also in Thick Skin Elastic Heart. But then also we've worked together on your solo shows. Which, again, if you have not seen, shame on you. The solo shows of Kevin Pilgriday are brilliant. One of the things that you have such a glorious talent for is capturing shit that we are not saying enough to each other, and then bringing us together by the celebration of that.
Oh, thank you.
So technically, I'm going to try and adhere to this structure I've set for this.
Good luck.
How did a conversation with my mate's 11-year-old son resonate with you?
It resonated a lot. I do a lot of work in schools with young people. I do a lot of workshops for young people, kind of bringing poetry into classrooms and into community groups and lots of different spaces. And it's the young guys are the hardest to get through to, right? Just so kind of protecting themselves, like the walls they have up. And I understand why they're there, because when I was their age, I had the same walls, I had the same barriers up, because I was so scared of standing out. I was so scared of people saying, oh, you're being weird, or, whatever it was at the time. And I totally get that no matter how much society moves on, like, young guys are still trapped in these little kind of pockets of conformity. Yeah. And they need to stay there. And sometimes they need to stay there for their own kind of protection, like looking after themselves. Like they don't want to get beat up, they don't want to get into a fight. But you can see it. It's round the edges of these people, who they want to be, what they want to say, what wants to come out. And I just felt like that poem like really got to the heart of that, of what happens when you give a young person, a young boy, time and space to think about things, to reflect on it, and to actually go past what the default is, what the default answer is, and go a couple of levels deeper and say, oh, actually, is it this? Am I interested in this? Is this actually what I want to say instead? So for any of you who happen to be listening that are friends of mine that do have young boys that you have produced, congratulations, because they're glorious, and this poem is not based entirely on your child, I promise. I remember James and I, my husband and I, really love a bit of retail therapy. No better sometimes than going to a fucking retail park and walking around. But I'm always astonished by the standard men's department for clothing, and like. And especially if you're in men's departments for clothing in like supermarkets. Yeah. A supermarket men's department for clothing it's only there because they want to really make sure that they're selling that stuff. Yeah. So it's a capsule collection always. It's never a large amount. But the capsule collection in these things is so illustrative of that
narrow scope that we're saying boys should be.
It's so grim.
It's grey, it's navy, it's black.
Yeah.
It's occasionally a bit of green, maybe a bit of brown.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And if it has a logo on it, the logo has to be like a Formula One team or say like Fender guitars or something like that. Something that is immediately kind of like a masculine kind of symbol.
Yeah.
The bit that really gets me is I feel like, and I feel this in my own life as well, guys aren't allowed to accessorize.
It was one of these things where I've born into a 6'5" body, and it's really hard to find anything that fits with certain things. But like over the years, I've developed such like clandestine methods to try and find stuff that fits my particular frame, because I'm absolutely not interested in the uniform that has been prescribed to the body that I was born into. We've talked a lot about the kind of themes of masculinity and the impact that toxic masculinity has had on us as human beings. One of the things that I vividly remember about working with you on Spam Valley was a moment you describe in the show of being a weird kid, and that your mum went out of her way to, I guess, shield you from elements of the world making you feel worse about that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I felt so connected to, because I definitely know that my mum would have done very similarly, because it will be no surprise to anybody that I've always been a weird kid, and definitely still feel like that. I guess what I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on is how that weirdness translates to you now as an adult.
I think that it just gave me space to know that it was okay to not be normal. For me to know that it's okay to not do what is expected of you. And that's maybe just translated into really basic things like, I have a fucking stupid job, which is this. Which, for us this is normal because we're both weird.
Yeah.
But if you asked someone out in the street, they'd be like, what the fuck, what is wrong with you? Yeah. Like, why would you be doing this? And like, you get paid how much? Well, why?
Nothing.
So I think that it gave me the permission to be weird. It gave me the permission to maybe make a bit of a spectacle of myself. In terms of, now I spend a lot of time standing on stage going, look at me, look at me, I've got something to say, listen to me please. Which most people, again, if you stopped someone in the street and was like, would you like to stand in front of people and tell them some secrets? They'd be like, what? Why would you do that? So yeah, I feel like sometimes being protected in your weirdness as a child just gives you a chance to nurture it. And even when, in my teenage days, it would definitely be deep down, it would be very protected and very kind of hidden away. It was still there. Yeah. It was still kind of growing. I just couldn't quite show it to the world yet. Yeah. And it took until I was a little older, and it took until kind of maybe finding poetry to help me find the words to express all these things. Yeah. That I managed to find an outlet to let it all out again. But yeah.
So I'm interested in investigating baby poet Kev, because I remember being in year 7, so in the English school system that means I was like 10. The assignment was that we would create a poetry anthology.
Wow.
And I just thought this was the best thing. And it's quite interesting now. I don't have that anymore. I don't have the actual thing, but I do remember it really vividly, and it's quite fascinating thinking back with that as an item, because I don't remember loads of bits of my childhood due to trauma in lots of circumstances. But I remember this poetry anthology, and I remember that under one of the words that was on the title page, I had got a leaf from a tree. Wow. And had glued that down, and that was the sort of background for the word. And beautiful. Like I did that sort of, I was and I did sticky back plastic over the top of it as to protect it. I remember one of the poems in it was called The Abyss, and I was into that. I was shown that stuff where you'll know what the proper name is for it, where it's a visual way of writing the poem.
Oh, like concrete poetry, yeah.
And my poem called The Abyss essentially was a series of words down, 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 getting smaller and smaller and smaller as you fell into the abyss. Clearly, like depressed pre-adolescent kid. It was only through that I think I discovered the therapeutic process that I would go through when poetry was necessary.
Yeah.
And I think I only ever... And I still return to it if I'm at a real loss for what to do with my brain. Yeah, how did baby poet Kev emerge?
So he emerged from various failures in the music world. Is the truth. Nice. Yeah, I used to be in lots of bands, and the bands were... Some of them were good and some of them were bad, but they would inevitably split up because of, creative differences or people shagging each other or whatever, I really enjoyed the act of being on stage. I don't think anyone else enjoyed me being on stage at that point, but I did. And suddenly I went along to an open mic night and I was like, oh, you're allowed to be on stage without a band? That seems weird. Like, I didn't know you were allowed to do that. And it just, in that second, just opened my mind up, and my initial pieces were garbage, as you'd expect. Pseudo rapping, I would say.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, definitely. I was coming from, that was my frame of reference for kind of how you put words together was, it has to have this beat and it has to kind of flow in this certain way. It wasn't for a while of kind of seeing great poets do their thing that I was like, oh, right, okay, there's another way to do this, and it's far more sophisticated. And it's way better. So it took a while. It wasn't an overnight thing for me. The instinct to do it was an overnight thing, but the quality came later.
I mean, listen, I think that stuff will always be an evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I will look back in 10 years' time at the stuff I'm writing now, and it might feel naive.
Does poetry still hold a therapeutic context for you, or is it just a job now?
Yeah, no, it's still it's still therapy for me. I write a poem every morning, which is usually terrible. Like, I would say 20 times out of 21 it's shocking.
Yeah.
That one time, maybe there's a little nugget of gold in there that I can bring out, but for the most part it's bad. But every morning something comes out.
That's brilliant.
And I don't know what it's going to be. I don't prejudice it in advance. I just sit down and I go, what's it going to be today? And usually it's just, oh, I'm feeling this way and it's coming out in some words, or I'm angry about this thing, or this thing's in the news, or family strife, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and that's just for me, it goes in a notebook. Sometimes I'll stick it online if I think it's good enough and people might get something out of reading it, but for the most part it just lives in a little notebook and no one will ever see it, and it's just there for the sake of being there.
Oh, it's gonna be part of the Kevin P. Gilday archive.
Well, you're laughing at that, but I love that to happen. I keep all my stuff because I think either one day someone's going to throw it all in the bin, right? Fair enough.
Yeah.
Or someone's going to keep a hold of it.
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe that Edwin Morgan didn't necessarily know that all of his everything. I was working on a project a few years ago that brought me into the Edwin Morgan archive in the Mitchell Library in town.
Mitchell, yeah.
And have you ever been down there?
I've never been in the archive. No.
It's fascinating because it is just a collection of books in the basement of a library.
Yeah.
But the preservation of it is so beautiful, and I hope that over time it becomes easier for people to access, because it's not just, and this was the thing I loved about it most, you got all of his notes, all of his little bits in the margins, all of his clippings of newspaper articles that are aligned to things within the collection. Yeah, I loved getting a picture of the person by hanging out in this person's archive, and I feel like there's something really glorious about how we've adapted our kind of historical archiving to be able to retain stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I fully hope, and get me first in line to put it together, that there will be a Kevin P. Gilday archive at some point.
I really hope so. I think that I'd be interested in anyone's archive though.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be interested in the archive of the guy next door.
Yeah.
Like, where's your train tickets? Where's your birthday cards?
Yeah.
Where's all that ephemeral stuff that makes up who you are?
Yeah. It's one of those things that I think is really beautiful about social media, where you come across little accounts like that, where it's about profiling the beautiful people within that realm. I'm thinking of, well, firstly, there's a thing that I followed for years called Post Secret, which was a visual art archive started in the States in the early 2000s, and it was basically an opportunity. You could send in an anonymous postcard that said something that you didn't ever really feel comfortable saying things out loud. Lots of them are stuff like, I hate my kids, and and like relatively terrible things that you're not really allowed to say. But some of them are really fascinating and beautiful read, and again, you get to capture the essence of someone in such a small amount of ingesting of the art. But I'm also thinking of things like there's a thing where standing on a bridge. It's a Instagram thing.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah, where someone is chatting. They've got a microphone, and a drone slowly kind of goes out, and you just hear their relatively unfiltered. Well, I'm sure it's completely unfiltered opinion about something on the world. And I just feel like the more of that stuff on our social media feeds, please. Like, I have such a love-hate relationship with it. I delete Instagram and Facebook from my phone all the time.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Because I feel like it gives me so much extra noise that I don't need.
Yeah, it fills me with such anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's always the anxiety of comparison. It's always the anxiety of, oh shit, I'm failing, I'm not doing as well as I should do.
Yeah.
And I feel like, but everyone must be feeling that, right? Yeah. Because everyone's always got somebody to compare themselves to. There's nobody that's like, oh, I'm the best, I don't have to worry about anything anymore. Yeah. It's like, oh, maybe this person who I'm going, oh shit, they're doing so well, maybe they're looking at someone else and feeling the exact same thing.
Thank you so much. What would be lovely, I know that you've brought a wee poem with you. The directive, dear listener, was, I'm doing something about masculinity. You talk about that quite a bit. Could you bring something like that with you?
Yeah. Well, I would say this one kind of deals in masculinity, but in some ways it's not explicit. It's the masculinity of expectation. It's the masculinity of how you're supposed to feel emotions and where they're supposed to go and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll read it anyway, and then we can go from there.
Thank
you.
This
was a piece that is part of my show Mischief Makar, which is out just now, on tour just now. But this also appeared as a kind of musical piece on the last album I made with Kevin P. Gilday and the Glasgow Cross. So it's called Everything Is Always Going Away. Nostalgia creeps conditional. Bread on the grill, dentures in a glass, a clip round the ear. I've forgotten the colour of my mother's eyes, but I still know all the words to Patsy Cline. Weird. Where does this knowledge settle when liberated from neural restraints? What part of the universe will suffer my encyclopedic learnings of 90s Italian football? Buongiorno, Batigo. It has to go somewhere. This heat we build inside ourselves, scorching from overuse, a large hadron collider firing particles through our grey matter. Energy doesn't just disappear. We know this. So where is it heading when I breathe my last? Because that memory of a Oaxacan sunset has to land somewhere. I want to pulverise my essence into a diamond. Keep its borders island tight. Coddle the precious pilot light of all that I felt. Only to watch it descend into dust and seep out into the universe. Everyone I have ever met, everything I have ever seen, everything I have ever thought, lost. But what if all love was just recycled, smelted from history, waiting to be recast in the present? A hand-me-down affection bestowed by the universe. Would we be so loath to lose it if we knew it was always coming back? We're all just passing through, and it's so fucking serious. No comic philosophy can convince me that this doesn't all mean something. These monkeys, ashen-clad, full of the fat of the land, searching for answers in the pale cosmos of our navel. It can't all be for nothing. This struggle to feel, this traumatic turning of seasons. I can't just be borrowing these experiences, renting love like an overdue library book. I need more than meditation to intuit a reason why I should build a temple to myself, only for it to be inhabited by a stranger. But some days I jump at the sound of the buzzer and get excited about a pastry, so maybe it's not that deep. What if, instead of a singing void mouthing show tunes into an unknowable abyss, there's just love, repeated over and over again in 1,000 languages and in none at all? What if it all loops back round not you, but the feeling, and we are but dumb custodians of temporary emotion? Would that make it better? Or would that make it worse?
I love it. I love the expansiveness of that and how unapologetically expansive it is. That you're like, what if I try and distill everything into something and absolutely can't? Like it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I've latched onto pastry. What was the line about pastry?
Some days I jump at the sound of the buzzer and get excited about a pastry.
And then, yeah, absolutely. And then there was the line near the end about love. What if it's...
Yeah. What if there's just love repeated?
Yeah. What if there's just love repeated? What if there's just love repeated? Kev Gilday. That's fucking gorgeous. It reminds me, there was a song on Kate Nash's second album that's like this epic rambling. It's fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the title of it is, and dear listener, I will put it in the fact sheet for this week so you can listen to it yourselves. But in that, she just was really unapologetic and being like...
It's everything all at once.
Yeah. It's why that film, I think, is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. That thing of kind of going... Sometimes the complexity of everything that we're going through, it is absolutely all right to acknowledge that it's all of it at the same time.
It's for me, it's that idea that, especially, having been a man in the world, is that you are somehow supposed to make sense of it. Your job is to make sense of it. Your job is to bring order to it. And I can't. I cannot. I can't do it. And the more I try to do it, the more I try to find how these things fit together and how this memory fits with this feeling and how it all is building towards something. This is why men go to war. This is why people build empires. This is because they're trying to work it out. They're trying to find meaning.
That's why suicide rates are the way they are.
Exactly, because people can't. And actually, it's because there's not. It's because it doesn't exist. And the more you reach for it, you might achieve something on the way, but you're never going to work it out. You're never, ever going to work it out. You're never going to get what you want. You're never going to understand it. And there is just some pastries at the end of it, and that's it.
It's really fascinating you say that about this sense that within social conditioning, it's that thing of within a patriarchal world, the man is in control, the man is meant to make sense of how these things go together. But actually, I feel quite liberated because after you said that, I was like, I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've probably worked quite hard over the years to make sure that I don't feel that way. But I do feel like I probably should be a bit more generous sometimes to men because of that thing that's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, my therapist will definitely tell you I have an automatic prejudice often with fellas, because I'm just like, you can show up, you can do better. Absolutely. You can be sensitive. You can learn how to turn on an oven. Like, that's not difficult.
Absolutely.
But I do think there's something really gross that you just highlighted that I feel like I need to be more generous of, with this idea that you are unwittingly burdened with this sense that you are meant to be the person that makes sense of that, and pass that on and hold that space for the other people within your sphere.
Yeah. Which is an impossible job, but also I agree with you that it doesn't mean you don't need to go to therapy. Yes. You definitely should.
Yes. Well, Kev, that I think brings us to a nice wee conclusion for it. You can find Kev P. Gilday online. What's your website?
It's just kevinpgilday.com. Very simple.
Very straightforward. Any final thoughts before we finish our recording today?
Empathy always, but yeah. Like responsibility too.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, and hello to the new listeners who have migrated here from Upload on the Arts Mix on BBC Radio Scotland. A preview of a conversation with my mate's 11-year-old son was featured this week on Upload on the Arts Mix, and the full programme will be linked in the fact sheet for this week. To download this for free, head over to Drew's website, www.drewmakestheatre.com. Cheers.